friends, and welcome back to Ghouls Night In, the spooky chat show with your best ghoul friends. I'm Penny Snark.
And I'm Midge Munster. And Penny, once again, you and I were kind of on a similar brain wave this week when we are both in the headspace of 90s spooky media, late aughts or late 90s, early aughts. So I just got back from Preserve Halloween Fest, which was
Yes.
super freaking awesome, by the way. And I had the pleasure of meeting a bunch of really cool folks. And specifically, one of the interactions that I really most treasured was getting to talk to Rachel True, who
Oh my
plays
God.
Rochelle in The Craft. And it was really, really amazing to meet her. And it got me wanting to talk some more about The Craft. And actually, many moons ago, my best friend Rain had come to me because I had been kind of scratching my brain for podcast topics and I wasn't coming up with anything. She was like, "You should do an episode about The Craft and how they had like actual witches on set to advise on that film." And I actually didn't know that when she brought that information to me. So this has been like in the back of my brain for a while. And then after talking to Rachel, I was like, okay, we have to talk about The Craft. It's time.
Ma'am, I seriously was like, just put The Craft on my list of like.
Did you really?
Coming up episodes, because I was talking to my best friend who just watched The Craft for the first time.
Oh my God. Oh, to be that person.
And she and I had similar thoughts about it, so I'm interested to hear your
Oh,
thoughts.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts, Miss Skeptic Fang. So, of course, if you've not seen The Craft, we are going to talk quite a bit about it here. Honestly, not the way we're going to talk about it, not a ton of plot spoilers, so I think you can still enjoy this and go into the film pretty blind. But there will be things here and there, just to give that warning for everybody. We also are going to dig into a few sensitive issues, specifically regarding Rachel's, history with Hollywood and things. So just to prepare everybody for that, we will be delving into some different things about eating disorder and racism. So that's your trigger warning. So I want to start by talking about The Craft in case you don't know what it is. Where have you been, Penny's best friend?
Where have you been?
Where have you been? The Craft is a wonderful film that came out in 1996, directed by Andrew Fleming. And the plot is generally about four teenage girls who are kind of outcasts at this Catholic high school, who end up kind of finding themselves and finding their power through each other and through the practice of witchcraft. And it stars Rachel True, as we just mentioned, Fairuza Balk, Niv Campbell, and Robin Tooney. So a bit about the casting of the film first. So we obviously we have Nev Campbell. And this was during a time where she was a big name because 96 is also the year that Scream was released.
Hey.
So Nev is big and booming at this time. And actually, funnily enough, we also have Skeet Ulrich in this movie as well. So a little Scream reunion. Nev plays Bonnie in this film, and she actually originally, there's been a lot of speculation about this, but it was believed that she was supposed to be playing the main role of Sarah. There were several press releases early on before the film hit production stage that mention a teen witchcraft movie where Nev Campbell plays a new girl at school, which is of course Robin Tooney's role, Sarah.
Yeah.
But she ends up playing Bonnie, which she's great in. It's cool to see Nev doing something a little bit different than typical Nev. We also have Fairuza Balk, which she plays Nancy in this movie, and this is, in my opinion, one of the greatest performances by an actress of all time.
So iconic.
I think that Fairuza Balk should be given no less than 700 Oscars. So good. She is absolutely unhinged in this movie. It's incredible to watch. And Fairuza actually had a bit of a background with paganism and Wicca, which made her even more favorable for the role of Nancy. And she was able to put in quite a bit of input and things to make the film feel as authentic as possible. She also, I found out in researching for this episode, bought an occult shop during the time that this movie was being made.
Oh,
And
she was
so
all in.
yeah, so she owned a metaphysical shop. It's pretty cool. But then I also saw like a later interview with her where she was like squashing rumors about her being a witch, and I was like, Queen, no one's buying it. Look at you. She also has like Wiccan tattoos and things. I'm like, girl, we know.
Yeah,
It's okay.
it's
We
cool.
know. Uh, and then I mentioned we have Robin Tooney as Sarah, and then of course Rachel True. So Rachel was not originally going to be cast in this movie because they did not want a black actress for the role. It was not written for a black actress, and it was really so. I obviously I went to a panel to hear her speak about her time on this film at the festival, and
Mm-hmm.
it was really crazy to hear her talk about this. Honestly, basically, so she first of all said she had taken some time kind of to herself between jobs, and she was really focusing at the time on her spirituality and tarot practice. Actually, like she's a huge tarot girly, which I love. And then this script landed in her lap, and she was like, I know this is meant for me. I know I'm meant to do it. Like, I've been focusing on these kind of spiritual practices, and it just feels aligned with where I'm at in my life at this moment. So she wanted her agent to submit her for the role, and they were like, nope, sorry. Like, they're not looking for a black girl. This isn't for you. Um, and Rachel, the queen that she is, went out, hired a new manager that her friend was using. She's like, I know this manager will fight for me to get me in the room. And they did. And of course, she ends up getting booked as Rochelle, which thank goodness. I cannot
Hell yeah.
imagine this movie without Rachel in it. And I know, I mean, obviously, we are both white women,
Yeah.
but I know, like, for so many young women of color and people of color, like, this was the first representation they remember seeing as, like, seeing themselves
Yeah.
in a movie. Um, so, first of all, massively important, very, very cool. But she talked a lot about, even though that she, booked this role and it was great, there was quite a bit of like BS that followed her casting. I guess that all the girls obviously in the film are dealing with something in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Like everybody kind of has a plight. Nancy's home life is like atrocious, and Nev Campbell's character Bonnie has like literal physical scars all over her body that she's trying to remedy. So originally the character Rochelle was supposed to be dealing with an eating disorder and have bulimia. And then once they cast Rachel, the writers rewrote her as have like her quote problem being dealing with racism. Now, obviously, that's like super valid, and I would say I can't speak for them, but I would say most, if not all, POC deal with racism at some point in their lives, so it's a very like valid issue. However, Rachel spoke in her panel to the fact that, like, basically this made Rochelle's problem being black, while all the other
Yeah.
people had problems that were, like, external to themselves, while, like, her problem was who she was. And she, like, talked about basically just that always struck her as odd, that her problem was, like, being a black woman.
Yeah, especially because, I mean, I know that we have, like, talked about this from, like, a queer perspective and stuff, too, and just,
Yes.
like, people have other problems
Yeah, like,
than the
black
ones
women are
related
allowed
to
to
their
be, yeah.
identity. Like, you certainly have, like, identity-related problems, and those are very valid, but, like, it doesn't always have to be about that, and it's kind of
Right.
minimizing to be like, well,
Exactly.
if you're black, then racism is the problem that
The
you
only
have.
problem you must ever experience, right? And she did reflect on it. It was also just very cool to hear her speak about it, because like what she's not angry, and she has every right to be
Yeah.
angry if that were the emotion she were experiencing, but she's like speaking about it from a place of just very matter of fact, like, this is how this happened to me, and I want to speak about it because I don't want to see it happen to anybody else. But she speaks about it also in a very, like, I don't know, like, she had a lot of understanding for the people who did these things to her, and I like more. I it couldn't be me, but I. She has a radiant energy about her. Really,
Yeah.
really cool human being. But she talked a lot about. She's like, in the moment, I wished that they would have let me go through with Rochelle being bulimic and like let me have a teenage girl problem that isn't dealing with this horrible issue of people being racist towards me. But she said now she's really glad because like they also like it was an opportunity to talk about it, and
Yeah.
she got to be a say in how they talked about it. And she's like, it wasn't being addressed a lot at that time. And now that storyline, so many young people saw that and related to Rochelle. And so she's like, I'm glad now that, that the representation is there, but it does suck also at the same, like it can be both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
She also mentioned, and of course, like, I didn't even think about this, but Rochelle's also the only character whose parents we never see in the film.
Huh.
And Rachel mentioned that like they had filmed an entire scene with Rochelle's parents and it never made it into the movie.
Oh.
And she cracked the joke about it. She was like, well, because Black people didn't have parents in the 90s, right? It's like, oh my God, wow. Yeah. Like, and it's sad though, because like I didn't question it. I was like, oh yeah. But again, just really, really wonderful to get to hear her point of view and hear her speak about it. And again, it just has so many, like, has such a right to be angry about things. Like, she told us that she was the only one of the 4 girls that was not invited on any of the press junkets.
Ugh.
Like, this was 1996. You and I were both alive. This is in our lifetime. That's wild. That's crazy. That is not that long ago. But yeah, I mean, just again, hearing her speak with such compassion for the whole situation and making sure that it doesn't happen to other people like her was very cool. But anyway, moving from that subject matter, she mentioned several times also that she and Firuza are still really close friends, which I think is awesome. And like,
Yeah, that's great.
of course they are. Like, they seem they're the 2 in that cast that I'm like, I want to hang out with you. Yes. And they're both like definitely very witchy women. Rachel actually, she was so funny. So I went to her panel, but then I went and like spoke with her at her booth later. And this con was so interesting because it's only the second year of Preserve Halloween Fest. And so like, while there were a lot of people, there weren't for like the size of the convention, mm-hmm. like for the type of guests they had there, it was very small.
Yeah,
and
I was surprised to see what kind of guests that they had there.
Yeah, and I mean, you could literally just like walk up to Rachel True and just like sit and talk to her for 15 minutes. Like, you could never do that at like Midsummer Scream.
No.
And so her and I just like chatted, and she was so nice. But she is definitely like a highly intuitive person. She's like, so what's your sign? Or she mentioned that she could tell I was an empath, and she's like, what's your sign? I was like, oh, I'm a Virgo. She was like, right, but where's the water in your chart? I was like, I'm a Pisces rising. She's like, yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. Just like very intuitive, very witchy. She also has her own tarot deck called the True Heart Tarot. I think everybody should check it out. It's really beautiful, and it has like essays in it as well. It's really a cool thing. But so, like I mentioned, both her and Firuza had kind of a little bit of a background in witchcraft and Wicca and paganism before the film. And as we mentioned at the top of the episode, something I think is very cool is that they hired a Wiccan consultant for the film. So they hired Pat Devin as a consultant, and Devin was a member of the largest and oldest Wiccan religious organization in the United States, which is the Covenant of the Goddess. And at the time that the movie was being filmed, she was the first officer of the group's Southern California Council. So she played a really big role in production process, and at times like was working directly with the actresses as well to kind of solidify their understanding of things. Rachel actually, again, mentioned in her panel that she and Firuza went to a Beltane festival with Pat to get a better understanding of the subject matter and everything. I thought that was really, it sounded a lot like she and Feruza were very invested in learning more, and then Robin and Nev were like less interested.
Yeah.
um, but thought that was very cool. So Devon played like a huge role in the production, and this is a quote from her. A lot of my suggestions were acted upon, and virtually all of my suggestions were given careful consideration, even if they didn't end up in the final version of the film. So I just thought that was really a cool thing, because it's not a documentary. Like it's
Yeah,
not a,
yeah.
it's very campy, and it's very um I mean, it is kind of, I think it's technically classified as a horror film, which I don't know if I would call it that myself, but um, for them to take the consideration, even especially at the time, it is very cool. So I think that's neat.
Yeah, it is kind of. I mean, I think that is a good thing, but it is kind of funny to contrast with like some of the other experience where it's like, well, we've got a Wiccan consultant. Maybe we could have used like a, you know, other
Right.
diversity consultants on this
May-
film.
Maybe we could have invited our black actress on the press
Yeah.
junket. Yeah, right. Yeah, so yeah, definitely some hits and some misses.
Some misses, but yes,
Some
that was a
real,
good choice for them
but
to
that,
make.
yeah, that was a cool choice at least. And in kind of the same vein, that there were also some strange happenings that occurred on the set, that some people attributed to the use of witchcraft on the set. Other people think, no. um, but again, Rachel talked a bit about this, specifically during the ritual scene on the beach where the
Mhm.
girls are trying to invoke Menon. Apparently, it took them several days of having to like return to this beach site to film again and again, because every time they did it, they would start the incantation in the circle. And specifically, like when Feruza gives her little like thing, she sticks the dagger in the air, the weather would like change and the sea would come up, like it would like swell really suddenly and come wash away the set and like blow out all the candles and everything. And Pat Devon, the consultant, said she believed that it may have been because even though Manon is a made up deity for the movie,
Mhm.
the name closely resembles, I'm going to say this wrong, Manahan, which is like a god of the sea in the Celtic religion. And she thought that maybe it had something to do with that, um, bringing up the waves and stuff.
Spooky.
Yeah. Rachel also mentioned that a white owl followed them from filming location to filming location. They kept seeing this white owl, and white owls in a lot of indigenous religions, as well as a lot of pagan religions, are seen as a symbol of blessing and protection. So that was where that was cool. She also talked. I wish I had filmed more of her panel,
Yeah.
because I'm trying to now recall her words and I don't want to misrepresent her stories. But she talked also about the shoplifting scene in the metaphysical shop. I believe she said that was someone's apartment that they were filming in, and that they had that big stack of like all the grimoire and the journals and stuff on that table in the middle, and that some of those were props, but then like the owner of the apartment had also put one of their personal ones on there. And that when Rochelle is like kind of sifting through those, there was no direction for her character at that point, because it was focused on the other girls. But she was sifting through them, and the journal that she happened to pick up and start going through was the one of the owner. And just that the person was like, that's so crazy that you like picked mine up. And mostly just Rachel was using this to talk about, the presence of energy. She was like,
Yeah.
something drew me to that, and it definitely had like someone's energy on it, and I felt it. So again, she's very witchy. We love Rachel True.
Yeah, it sounds super interesting. I bet that would have been a cool panel to attend.
Yeah. So I want to, before I kind of wrap up some thoughts here, you said you have thoughts about this movie. I would love
Okay.
to hear your thoughts.
See, and so Midge promised no spoiler, so I won't say anything like super specific. my issues are with the narrative of the film, not any of the
Oh,
witchy
okay, sure.
representation. I didn't see The Craft until like a little bit later in life, and like
Hmm.
with all of the hype, I really hate the ending of it. I love the start of it, and it's like I'm like, yes, this movie's awesome, I'm loving it, and then it just takes such like a 90s wah
Such a
wah
turn.
moralistic turn, and I'm like, this sucks.
Yeah. And I can see that, and I definitely agree that there's a bit of that. I do, once again, as usual though, you've led me into
Oh, good.
a great point, kind of as my wrap up point here, because and we talked about this in another, maybe it was the one where the slumber party where we talked about light as a feather, stiff as a board.
Hmm.
Um kind of why these, witch films and movies and things of the late 90s and early aughts were such a big deal, and why they remain so cult classic-y. um, and I really like this movie because even though it is a cult classic and it's campy and it's, it definitely has some issues, um, I think it's also a really interesting commentary on like power where women are concerned.
Yeah.
And I want to read this quote that I found because I thought it was a really good one. This is from a Vulture article written by Angelica Jade Bastian. And she said, witchcraft is more than mere teenage rebellion for these young girls. It's a means to attain what at first glance appears unattainable: power, control, autonomy, and the ability to live beyond various oppressive forces that govern their lives. For many girls, witches are our first brush with the depiction of feminism and the price women pay for searching for control over their own lives. And I feel like that articulates something I haven't been able to put into words when dealing with like witch media.
Yeah.
um, and even though this movie does take a weird turn, I think it does offer like the commentary about the kind of like fear of the wild woman and what happens when a woman gets too much power. Um, I don't know. I love Nancy's arc in this, even though it's kind of cressy.
Yes, and I won't you and I can discuss off mic any
Yeah,
specifics, but yeah, I think that there are other ways that even like the specific storyline would have been
sure.
handled in a way that I felt was more um satisfying, just because I really did like love how much of like female friendship and like female power
Yes.
was part of the movie, and so I wish it had resolved in a different way. But I mean, there's a reason that like Nancy is the one that like we still see like a lot of cosplays of. You still hear her on TikTok sounds. Like definitely an iconic turn, and I don't hate that storyline, but I think I would have resolved in a different way if I wrote The Craft.
I can agree with that. I also just tidbit, fun fact, nugget. Um, this is not really a spoiler, but there are snakes in the movie. All the snake scene, all those snakes are real.
Ooh,
All the
cool.
like bugs and snakes and everything are real.
Ugh, to bugs.
So, when you watch this, if you haven't watched that, keep that nugget in your brain that every insect and bug on this set is a real insect and snake, and then report back to how upset you are by that information later. um, but yeah, that's my little blurb about the craft. Again, I don't I don't know if she'll ever hear this, but Rachel True, if you're by some chance listening to this, thank you for your time, and thank you for everything you did in this film and the path you paved. And this is a great film. I hope that if you have watched it, that you learned something new, and that if you haven't, you're intrigued and you go check it out and let us know what you think. Uh, and if you'd like to let us know what you think about this podcast, we would love it if you would consider leaving us a review wherever your podcasts are sold. And luckily, I think we have a review to share today, don't we, Penny?
We sure do. Today's 5-star review comes from Allspice Vice, entitled My Weekly Serotonin Boost, with a black heart emoji. They write, I truly look forward to Midge and Penny's new episodes every Tuesday. I can't get enough, and sometimes I just re-listen to episodes when I need some extra spooky giddiness in my life. I love this show so much, and I hope it continues to flourish. 10 stars.
5 for each of us.
Yes,
Yay!
thank you for 10 stars. Now we don't have to fight over them.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, that is all for today. If you would like to engage with us over on the Instagrams, you can find us over there at Ghouls Night in Pod. We share some images relevant to each episode, and we love to chat with y'all in the comments about your thoughts about these topics. If you're looking for me specifically, you can find me across all platforms at Midge Munster.
And you can find me at Penny Snark. And I will just give a quick shout out since I did get a question when I wore my Ghoul shirt this week.
Oh, yes.
If you would like a Ghouls Night in t-shirt or tote bag or mug or sticker, you can get those. Those are on Midge's website, midgemunster.com/shop. It is also linked in our show notes or in the merch highlight on our Instagram. And we appreciate that, and do tag us when you wear it because we love to see it.
I actually saw I'm assuming it's probably because you wore it yesterday. We got an order this morning. I was like, hell yeah.
Hell
wear those Ghoul shirts.
Do it.
That is all for today. So until next time,
Goodbye.